back with another Mr. New Dad. We got a new logo and we've got also a new face because John Wayne Mullins has been out with COVID and he is essentially not recovered yet and to get back on here. But we have also a co-host joining me today, John McAstill. And John and I go back way in the beginning. I interviewed him on my podcast, Military Veteran Dad, almost 2.5 years ago. He's friends with John. And so the opportunity came up for John to step in. And I kind of feel like Regis and Kelly or Kelly and Ryan, where they always have a co-host swap in because they always do a live show every day. But when they're out, they always have someone swap in and fill it in. So I kind of had that feeling today. So I'm really excited about doing this conversation with John because the energy changes, the conversation will change, but we'll go in the direction that we've got set up here, which is solving our biggest challenges as a dad. Because as a dad, we don't really know all the answers. We tell ourselves we do, but we really don't on the inside. And so what John and I are going to talk about today is how do you solve the big elephant in the room? Where do you get these solutions, these problems that seem endless?
Dude, and they do. They seem endless, and it seems like we're all alone in this fight. I say that, but I guess I should also say thanks for having me, John Wayne. Thanks for trusting me with your show, what you and Ben are doing together, what you're building together. I love being a part of it, and I love the fact that we're all working as fathers to be the best fathers we can, to be the best husbands that we can, but also we can be support to one another in this effort, in this initiative, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel because a lot of people have invented it already. So why not learn from those who have gone before us? So that's what we're here to do, man.
And we're both military men because you are a former Navy SEAL, and that background seasoned with fatherhood almost feels like, how did you survive probably being a Navy SEAL when these humans don't have manuals, they don't have instructions, and they don't follow instructions. So you have 3 younger kids, I have 3 older kids, which always provided this great balance. So I know between your Navy SEAL background, this conversation of solving problems, we're going to go in a good direction here.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, this fatherhood thing is tougher than anything that I did in the military. And again, there are so many billions, literally, of folks who have done it before us. So why not learn from those who have gone before us? And again, I'm wanting to learn from you, Ben. I'm wanting to learn from those who are watching and throw some stuff in the chat. I'm by no means an expert in this journey. Like you mentioned, I've got 3 young kids. I've got a almost 5-year-old little girl, an almost 3-year-old little boy, and a 6-month-old little girl. So 3 little ones, 2 still in diapers. And there are days that I feel overwhelmed. There are days that I feel that, I just have enough energy to get home. And then, I got to be a dad on top of it. So, yeah. Hey, share your wisdom with me, brother. Share it.
So let's talk about this idea of it being a big job and the work, the patience, this whole new season that we enter. I think the first thing that and I think for military men, it's the hardest one because it's this thing that like you don't really know what to do when it shows up, and there's no manual and there's no process to even acknowledge how do you accept this new title, that we had this perfect identity that had this something you could take a picture of it and it looked good in uniform. But then there's this little human being that spits up on your shirt, your uniform, and life just continues to give you problems like that. And you have to figure it out. And I think the first part is acknowledging that this is a big job that never really ends. Fatherhood is a lifelong seasonal change of whether you are an early dad, whether you're a teenage dad, or you got grandkids. It's a continuation. And the problem never really stops. You just get better at leveraging your resources, which is something that we're going to be hitting on big today, is how to find the solutions to those problems, which the answer is always right in front of you. But it really admits, first starting with acknowledging you are a dad and there are many like you and many people have come before you.
Right. Literally billions. Yeah. And, John and I were in a small little mastermind group that we share a lot of stuff openly in. And I know we've spoken about, our energy levels and this and that, and our expectations of what fatherhood was going to be and where we are in relation to those expectations. I think one thing that fathers and mothers, parents in general, need to hear is you're doing great. You're doing great. Because I think this perception that we have is something like these pictures where it's all perfect all the time, and then when it's not perfect in real life, we're like, well, there must be something that I am doing personally wrong. And that's not the truth. It's just it's just part of the game,
That
man.
this
It
baby
involves
is providing feedback from the universe of why I suck
yeah.
as a parent.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's and they are unbelievable mirrors, but we also need to realize that, hey, um, it is tough. It's hard work, just like the slide here says. It's hard work and it involves a lot of patience, but it also, you need to give yourself grace as a parent and realize that you're doing great. You're doing great. As long as you're putting an effort in there, there's tons to be learned from your kids, from other parents, but give yourself some grace too. I think that's important.
You reminded me of something that has kind of been my new. It took me a long. I mean, I've been a dad for now 9 years, and I really feel like I've only tapped into this idea in the last year. So it would have changed my life a long time ago. Of not taking yourself so seriously. Like
Mm.
literally, when you walk around, you just got puked on. Like find the humor in that. That really, this is what's going to happen today. And I think as dads, we often get caught up in taking ourselves serious because work is often serious business, and so we apply that in dad. And we don't realize there's a switch of like nothing really is going to be that serious here as kids. There's going to be moments where you make the right choice. There's going to be moments you make the wrong choice. And finding the laughing moments. I can't tell you how many times I've been on a trip with my kids in the back. We're going on some adventure. And it's just like a nuclear meltdown of emotions. They're yelling at each other. They're saying it's not being fair. Someone's not taking turns. And I'll just start laughing. And I'm like, really? Really? Is this what fatherhood is supposed to look like? Because this was not in the brochure. And finding the humor in the everyday moments of fatherhood really opens up that door and invitation to find the joy and just the experience. I think that's something when you take yourself too seriously, and I did, is you limit the experience of fatherhood from really shaping you as well. That letting
Yeah.
that funny moment, you be more lighthearted. I mean, you just show up at work. You can tell who has kids and who doesn't at work because they show up more patient. They take themselves less seriously at work. And the meltdowns at work don't really affect them because they've trained for it every day when they go home.
Yeah, because there's bigger, more important things in their lives, and that's these kids, right? The job is definitely helping to be that provider, and as a father, that's a big part of what we believe is our role, and being that provider, and that job is definitely a part of that. But the truly important things are for whom we're providing, right? Our wives, or spouses rather, and our children. And yes, man, they will definitely help you to be more lighthearted, because you have to be, because if you take everything so seriously, it can be exhausting. And if you think that these 4-year-olds, these 2-year-olds, and these 6-month-olds are going to respond, I mean, that's my anecdotal situation, but hopefully it can relate to others. If you think they're going to respond to your demands, you're wrong. I mean, they're not wired to be thinking rationally right now, right? My 4-year-old, my 2-year-old, they're, like you mentioned, Ben, they're in the back of the van, wrestling over, I don't know, some
A
piece of
French fry.
some piece of junk toy that came from McDonald's, and there's two of them, and they're, for some reason, they're wrestling over one, and you try to rationalize with them. You're like, hey, pay attention. There's two of them, blah, blah, whatever the case may be. But you try to rationalize with them, good luck, because they haven't developed that part of their brain yet. So it does involve a lot of hard work and a lot of patience. And then you need to realize that you are the adult in the situation, and take a step back and realize what's happening in their little brains and how they're growing and how they are not knowing a lot yet. They're going to learn, but they don't know a lot yet. And when they're wrestling their little brother in the back seat over a French fry or over some stupid McDonald's toy, they think that is the universe in that moment.
Yes.
That is everything to them right now. And man, I'm even talking through that right now. This very morning, driving my kids, the two older ones go to Montessori school, and they were wrestling in the back over my phone, because that was the only way that I was able to coax them into the van. I was like, hey, I will put a train movie on. My son's obsessed with trains. I put a train movie on for my son on the phone, and I don't like to give them too much screen time, but sometimes that's the only way to get them
You
in
got to
their
write the
van without
checks that are going to get the results that you want. That's what it
exactly,
comes down to
exactly, man.
sometimes.
And you got to pick and choose your battles. And my battle this morning was not one over the phone because it's a 7-minute drive to the Montessori school. But my daughter wanted the phone just as much, and I'm like, what did I do? What did I
Yeah,
do?
what door did I open? How do you put this thing back in the box?
Exactly, Pandora's box, man. What did I open here? But yeah, a lot to be learned, and yeah, I'm still learning every day from my own mistakes and learning from others like you, man. So
Let me ask you this question. You reminded me of some advice that I often have to remind myself of. How old are you?
I'm 44.
So you're 44. Do you have life figured out at 44?
Well, yeah, obviously.
So I'm 37 and I do not have life figured out. And so the irony, and when you think about like how old you are and like how much life you haven't figured out and like how much you struggle still on an everyday basis, always give the perspective they're 5, 9, whatever age, even 16. They only have however many years of experiences to draw on. Like, who are we to judge them that they haven't figured it out when we've been here 10 times longer and still haven't
True.
figured out this riddle?
True.
So when you kind of bring that mind,
yeah,
exactly. We're not. And so that's what allows you to create space of like, and also empathy. Because then when you bring it like, oh man, I know exactly what it's feeling like to not know how to navigate the emotions of the playground. Because really the next front lines of parenting happens in third grade. Because in third grade, they kind of become emotionally aware, but they become socially aware, and they kind of realize that they're just a small person in a big world. And they also, like, especially for my daughter, it was really difficult with navigating like popularity and who was playing with me and who's not. And to her, that is just as big as me losing a job. And
exactly.
that moment of realizing that, like, she hasn't figured it out, I haven't figured out things. And that allows us to have an empathy and even me share some stories from that. Of I've got stories that can help her and she's got stories that can even help me as well. But not taking yourself so seriously and realizing we haven't figured it out and we've been here a lot longer. Who are we to judge them for not having the answer of a French fry and a McDonald's toy to understand that this isn't the end all be all of life?
Right. And I think you hit on a very important attribute there is empathy, right? As a father, as a parent, having empathy for what your child is experiencing and will experience, but then also having that self-empathy for what it is you're going through and what you need as a parent, because it is exhausting. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the thing that I've loved most in this life is being a parent. So it's exhausting, but when you take a step back and you're like, okay, what do I need? Sometimes what you need as a father is taking that step back away from your family for an hour, maybe 2, and resetting your mind, resetting your body. So that's self-care so that you can be present and be the best father that you can be with your little ones, be they 1 kid, be they 15 kids. Good luck if you have 15, but it's somewhere in between, and depending on their age as well. I mean, varying ages, teenagers, toddlers, babies, full-grown adults. There's empathy that comes into play, and you have to use that. And sometimes the only way to fully use that is by taking care of yourself and setting aside some time for yourself. So, yeah.
And we're talking about why we should always be learning. And I think your background, the Navy SEAL, and any background in businesses is always learning, because we need to understand the future. We have business objectives. We have visions. We need to understand how we're going to implement. We need to help understand how we're going to hire more people. There's always reasons to know. And a good leader learns, he knows that he's never stopped learning in that process. But we never really think about that as a dad. And that's really like the crux of where dads get hung up, is we think this biological act of bringing this child in is the moment we become a dad, and it is, but that's really where this whole new area of leadership begins, because you always need to be learning in this category. And the irony is we often don't think of what we learn at work applies at home. The same reason when you don't know the answers at work, you hire consultants, you go read books, you listen to podcasts. But how many dads don't think about that same effort applying at home?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because they think that through osmosis they're just gonna get it somehow, or they're gonna reach some level of enlightenment to where they're suddenly the dad that they were dreaming to be, that they were hoping to be. But why not learn from others? Why not learn from others' mistakes? Because there've been plenty, right? And why not learn from others' successes? Because there have also been plenty there. I mean, little life hacks. I mean, the other day, uh, I've got a 6-month-old, so I'm still carrying around a baby in a car seat. And my wife showed me something that she'd seen on Instagram with a life hack about the way that you can carry it differently. If you weave your arm through the seat or through the handle and hold it a different way, that car seat can be significantly lighter and less of a load on your shoulders and just less awkward to carry. And I know for those of you watching who haven't had kids, that dang car seat can get really awkward and really heavy really quickly, even with a 6-month-old in it that only
Especially if you
weighs.
stop somewhere to
Yeah.
start talking to someone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of like the car seat hack, one hack that I don't think I learned till kid 2 is onesies. That at the top, the little slit, that's for when they've pooped too much in the onesie and you don't want to take it over their head to get the poop on their head. That's so that it can come downward.
There you go,
It's
man.
been there the entire time. I just never
Yeah.
wondered why there's these slits in the top, and it's because it needs to go down when they've pooped their pants and pooped up the
Yes.
outfit and all over the
Up
back. Like
up the back, man.
it's
Up
your
the back.
911 button so you don't get all over their face.
Yeah, I had a onesie. So my wife works in the healthcare industry. She has these shears, right? That like if somebody comes into the hospital with trauma, they just cut their clothes off, and we have those in the house. And there was one incident where my newborn, at the time, she's 6 months old now, she had done one of the blowouts and it was up the back, and there was no way I could take it up, or sorry, down, like you mentioned, to save her getting poop on her head. So it's like, well, I'm just cutting this thing off. So I took the shears and just cut it. And yeah, that was one of those outfits that just goes directly in the trash. You're like, there's no saving that one. There's no recovery.
But the humor in it, like I'm sure you probably weren't laughing in the moment, but like the
Oh,
ability
no.
to look
Looking
back
back
and
on it.
laugh,
Yeah.
ability to look back and laugh on it is something that's like where you need to remember, like you're not going to remember the hard days looking back. And I don't like that. I think that's why we are able to have more kids, because we don't remember the hard times. You don't remember how miserable being pregnant is. And it's almost like all of that just goes away. And even as a stay-at-home dad, there's a few stints last year where the kids came home virtually. It was like
Mhm.
Groundhog's Day on acid every day. But when I look at my phone, I only see the positive. I don't remember the hard days. I only remember the good parts. And
Yeah.
that reminded me and taught me a big lesson that feelings are temporary, memories are forever. And so that's
like
when
that.
like get less sticky with the emotion, but more sticky with the memory,
Yeah.
because that's what's going to matter years down the road.
For sure, man.
And even before
Yeah.
having a baby, that's the same kind of idea. Like, don't worry about like the stress of being pregnant and all that stuff that go with it. How can you create this last moment of connection before the next 18 to 28 years of your life are committed to raising kids?
Right. And that's that brings us to the slide that's in front of us right here is where was our mind, where was our focus, where was our energy before we had kids, right? And it is just exactly like this slide says. It was on each other. The times, even though as non-parents or life before kids, LBK, you felt that those were tough times. You thought they were complex times, but you throw kids in the mix, everything gets infinitely tougher. I mean, from traveling from one state to the next to, because everything you got to travel with for a baby, to figuring out, do we need to start a college savings plan, to everything. But you're focused on, before baby, you're focused on each other and you're focused on yourself. Times are certainly simpler. Just like the slide says, money and finances, it's primarily about the two of you. Most people don't start a child's college savings plan or anything before they have kids. And then weekend getaways, date nights, those were so easy to pull off. And now the logistical planning that goes into just having a few hours away alone.
Let alone the
as a couple.
$100 you got to throw at a babysitter.
Also that, yeah. And you got a budget.
You
for
haven't
it.
even gone out and spoiled yourself yet.
Literally, I mean, my wife and I have gone on dates where And now I'll admit we are so blessed. We have an au pair, and she is phenomenal with the kids, and that helps with the date nights. But before, when we were hiring babysitters, we would hire a babysitter, realize that that was the budget for date night. It was the babysitter, and all we would do is drive and go do a hike. Something that cost $0 because we had already spent the dating budget on the babysitter. But yeah, that adds up, and it's harder and harder to do as you have additional kids in the mix. But then there's also like when you do go on the date as a dad, as a parent, what do you talk about? What do you talk about? Ben, I'd love to know what you talk about on your dates, because I know where my mind and where our conversation goes instantly is, oh, the kids are so cute. We miss them. And instantly, before you know it, you've spent 75% of the date talking about the kids that you're trying to quote unquote get away from. I mean, and that sounds terrible. I'm not trying to get away from my kids, but we're just trying to get that break. But yeah, more often than not, we find ourselves on the date talking about our kids.
I would say definitely in the early stages, that's definitely where our conversation went, of like sharing stories, sharing how we're going to manage. It was almost more like in some cases like a business meeting, because you were talking about like the next few months of like organizing things, what was going on, what's going well, what's not going well. I would say once the kids get older than 5, like all of them, you kind of shift in this like, okay, we've got another 15 years here to go. What's the plan to get through this? And how can we focus, but also like find ourselves again? Like, how can we bring back different things that allow, because then you can kind of like go on like overnight trips, and you can go travel a little bit with just you and your spouse. And so it's almost like once you get past that year 5, you kind of go back into this like rediscovery phase of like, okay, what's this next season going to look like? And how can we reprioritize us now that the kids are kind of all self-sufficient? Other than height, they can pretty much almost do everything except for maybe read something. And it creates a kind of a nice space where you can kind of just go back to dreaming again of like, what do we want to try to add back? And something for me that I didn't spend any time, because I didn't even have any awareness of it, is I really didn't have an understanding of who I was before having a baby. So I didn't understand who I needed to keep on the other side. And it was almost just kind of this flow of life of like letting whatever life happen. And with no intention of like, what do I want to make sure I keep doing? What are the things that I want to make sure I don't lose within myself? And I think that's something both mom and dad need to focus on, is who do you want to make sure you still are on the other side of this, that you don't want to make sure it changes you. And even just putting words to it can create intention. If we don't put words to it, oftentimes it just can become a subconscious, like, oh my God, it's been 3 years and we haven't even talked about this. Yeah. But if you create intention around it, then both of you know, and a supportive marriage can both encourage each other to go where they need to go. That can kind of like be each other's bumpers to make sure that the bowling ball doesn't fall into the gutter and end up missing the.
I love that analogy, man. That's a perfect analogy, and I'm gonna use that tonight when I'm talking with my beautiful bride.
If it doesn't work, it wasn't mine.
But if it does, you're claiming full credit, right?
Yes.
Of course. I love it, man. But yes, you talked about intention, and intention is so critical, but you have to be intentional about setting that intention. I mean, so much of the time I've found when things are going a little bit sideways, whether that's in the family and being a father, and just the kids are going all over the place, or whether it's in my relationship, it's because I haven't been intentional and put in the effort. I've gotten complacent, the opposite of being intentional and putting effort in. I got complacent. I was like, okay, we've got this figured out, and I've got this ride that I'm on, and we're just going to ride it out. And suddenly you realize, oh crap, it's a roller coaster. It's taking a left turn, a hard right, and then it's going to a loop. You hadn't planned on that. Well, guess what? You better plan on it, because it's going to happen. And being intentional about that, and then leaning on your partner, leaning on your friends, and taking some time to kind of, whoa, all right, that was tough. What did I learn from it? Going back to the previous slide, is life, being a father, we're constantly learning. So
Or
we've
who
got to,
needs to know this lesson? Like, even
yeah,
like, you know what? This dad that just became a dad needs to know what I just figured out, because it's a landmine. It's going to blow his leg off. If he, like, it almost did mine if I don't tell him about it.
yeah, yeah. And you don't know about those landmines unless you're talking to other parents, other dads. Um, and then when you do, you're going to find out pretty quickly that, there's different seasons to fatherhood, to parenthood. Um, but you're also going to find out pretty quickly that other people have, like you said, stepped on that landmine and learned from it. So, hey, you can avoid that landmine. You can grow and get past it before ever experiencing it. So yeah, man, it is a wild ride for sure. But I'm one that
Especially for the first
I'm
one. I
loving.
think the becoming a dad, it has this like permanence to it, that we forget that life isn't really permanent. There's always changing. College is only 4 years. Your career might seem permanent, but really often it's more just a season, and it's just where you are right now. And it's
Yeah.
that permanence that almost like keeps us like in a prison mindset. Like, oh my God, what did we do? Like, how did we ever think this was a good idea? And then you do it 3 more times and you're like, how did we repeat this? And how did we think this was a good idea? And how did we ever do this with 1, let alone 3?
Right.
It introduces a whole new line of thought. And I think it's that permanence that gets us set up for that we made a mistake, that almost leads us down this rabbit hole of, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. I don't think this is what I don't think I'm a good dad. I just feel disconnected from this baby that doesn't seem to listen to what I want to do. But it's really realizing that it's just a season. And once you realize that this season is moving with or without you, this baby will continue to grow and mature, whether you're there or not. Realizing it's a roller coaster and just going with the roller coaster. And the roller coaster doesn't change you. It just is a ride that you're going in the peaks and the valleys of it. And there's going to be moments where they smile for the first time and you're like, oh man, that was worth all the long nights in the last week. Or when colicky baby, when they end, like you're like, oh, that was hard. But then they smile and you're like, oh man, that makes it all worth it. They're still here. And it's that permanence that I got stuck on. And I see so many dads get stuck on it as well, as that this isn't forever. This is just an intense time. Like almost going to buds. It's just an intense time. It doesn't last forever. That was even something I used in boot camp, in Marine Corps boot camp, where it was like, we're getting PT'd out in the sand pit. And I was like, nothing lasts forever. Just a few minutes from now, we're going to be in the chow hall and it'll be over. Just got to get through it. That mindset, I didn't use it being a dad, but man, it would have served me if I would have figured out the magic trick.
Yeah, well, you have. I mean, right? You talked about the impermanence and permanence. Guess what? You're still a dad, man. You just said,
I'm still learning it. Yes, I'm still learning it. But man, those early days are, I often describe them as like the Instapot phase of life, where life is always under pressure and it's always trying to increase the flavor, but it doesn't always work.
Yeah, well, it's Instapot in more ways than one. I mean, sometimes that's all you eat for a week is stuff that comes out of the Instapot, or some microwavable quick meal, because you are exhausted, and preparing a meal as a parent is the last thing that you have the energy for, because if you put too much energy into that meal, then you're going to fall asleep with your face in the bowl of soup or whatever. But yeah, it is. I love the impermanence, and realizing that nothing that we're doing is permanent. And that's also, hey, we have a season of being a father, but our children also have seasons as being a baby, newborn, infant, toddler, kid, teenager. And we need to realize that they're in those seasons too. And those are not permanent. And if we don't take time to appreciate those seasons, those phases they're in, we're going to be looking back on pictures 5 or 10 years down the road and be like, I don't even remember my child as a baby. Like it went so freaking fast. Where did that time go? So you have to realize, there's impermanence in the phases and seasons of fatherhood, but there's also impermanence in the phases and seasons of those children that we have been entrusted with as fathers. And if you can take that step, it allows you to be more present and in the moment with those kids and enjoy those moments, take them less seriously, and thrive afterwards. As a father, as a family unit. So I love that impermanence. Absolutely.
You reminded me of something that I signed up for and I committed to it, and I still believe it. It's a hard road to commit to. And that is, Daddy, I want something more. Can you come here at nighttime? And
Yeah.
it's so annoying because you can do it 5 times sometimes in the beginning of like, Dad.
Yeah.
And we have a 2-story house. So if we're downstairs watching TV, it's getting up on the couch, being like, oh, I just want to watch TV. And like, you gotta go up and figure out whatever's wrong. But there's a part of this that if you sign up for it to ride the roller coaster however many times, there's going to be a day that it was the last time that they said, Dad, and you're never
Yes.
going to know.
Right. Yes,
But
exactly.
it's going to pass, and you'll be like, well, if someone would have told me it was the last one, or if we were running out, I would have paid attention. Well, you don't get that. Doesn't exist in fatherhood, which is
Right.
why hanging on to every crazy freaking moment that's out there, like the ones where you're just like, just go to bed.
Yes.
Hanging on to that and being like, there's going to be a day where that's all I want back. Or I often talk, because all of my kids are so younger, there's going to be a day when my daughter is asking me about a boyfriend problem. And I'm like, it was so much easier when I just had to tuck you in and wipe your butt. Like, your life was so
Yes.
much easier to keep moving when that was the only life problem. Well, in that moment of, I've been in podcast interviews last year where my daughter would be like, Dad, can you wipe me? And I got to stop interviewing and go wipe her butt.
Sure.
That's what life looked like then. And that'll be a moment that I'll be like, man, it was so much easier when the only thing I had to worry about when I was in an interview that I needed to wipe your butt. And life only gets harder. And so it's important to hang on to the moments, even when they're annoying. Because like I said, you're never going to know when it was the last of it and it's over.
Yeah. Well, so you said it only gets harder. And to hear that, as a father of young ones, that's a little disheartening. So I'm hoping that in ways it gets easier and in ways it gets harder, right? So
I would say it gets harder, but it gets richer.
Oh, I like that.
The experience and the reward. So the hardness comes in the conversations, but the richness comes when like a conversation. Like, I've been talking with my 9-year-old. She's an emotional girl, just like me. She's cries very easily and she gets upset very quickly, very empathic with others. And she's very strong in those emotions. And I can't tell you how many times at bedtime talk we've talked about emotions. We've recycled the day of what could have gone better, what didn't go right. And the other day, I was just sitting down at lunch and she's like, Dad, this is super random. But I find it so much easier to be happy when I don't have all these crazy thoughts in my head anymore. And I'm so thankful that we started talking about them and letting them go. Like, some of them were just weird things of like, people did something on the bus like months ago and she was holding it in and it was just bothering her. And she didn't know it was bothering her, but just collecting those random moments. And she's like, I just feel better knowing my mind's empty. And I was like, man, that was a 3-year conversation that cycled into that one 30-second compliment.
Yeah.
It's that richness where you see the fruits of what you've been planting, and you get to see the conversation or her ability to see what's going on in something in real life and be able to come up with a really adult opinion. Like, that richness of like, man, you were 9 years old and you just did something that adults struggle to do. That's the part that counteracts the hardness, where the conversations are harder, but you get to see the richness really come through when you invest in these different areas and conversations and be there through whatever the conversations go. Like, that moment there's going to be a day. Like, I didn't plan that. I've been preparing for it for years now and having conversation, but no idea maybe when there was a milestone in sight and just randomly happened. And it was like, man, all of those conversations were validated in 30 seconds that were really annoying every night when we'd be upstairs talking for 20 minutes about playground issues, friends issues. Nobody likes me. Yeah. Someone said, whatever. So the kids on the bus are saying things like, it's an all out war in conversation sometimes. And it just, that richness comes through when life continues to keep going and it starts to show up. So that's the hope that I would give you, is that they're hard, but the richness of what you get to see of who they're becoming makes it worth it. Even more so when you're trying to keep them alive when they're younger.
Well, there you go. I mean, and that's the seasons, right? The seasons of life. And I love how you said it gets harder, but it gets richer. And I'll use another experience with me and my 4-year-old, almost 5-year-old little girl. Yesterday, she was drawing, herself and a couple of friends that live here locally. And I said, "Hey, sweetheart, they're going to have to move away soon. They're a military family." And she was like, "Well, why?" And I was like, "Well, they're a military family. She's like, what's the military? And I was like, well, you know what a soldier is? She said, I know what a soldier is. A soldier is somebody who shoots their guns at other people. And I said, well, yeah, that could be a part of being a soldier. And, soldier for her is all encompassing, right? In her mind, I was a soldier. In her mind, a Marine is a soldier. In her mind, a sailor is a soldier. Soldier is all encompassing for military. I was like, yeah, I was a soldier of sorts. And she was like, well, you were a good soldier. And I was like, I was like, was I a good soldier? Like it made me really think, and I had never thought about it to that level. And the innocence in her saying you're a good soldier, one. And then she was like, I've seen pictures of you as a soldier. I was like, really? Where did you see? And I've got this picture downstairs of me with some of the guys that I was overseas with, many of whom, unfortunately, in this particular picture were lost in a combat operation that we actually discussed on your podcast, Ben. And she's like, yeah, you're the one in the picture who's smiling. So you're the good soldier. I was like, whoa. Like the fact that she noticed that I was smiling, first of all, and then in her mind, that's what makes you a good soldier, is if you're smiling. The conversations are very innocent, but they're also profound and can be very rich. And you have to appreciate those conversations and that season of fatherhood, that season of parenthood. And then, what does get you through this tough season, this first season? Let's talk about that a little bit more.
I think what I love about your story is it opens up invitations to talk more about it. And anytime you get to see how they interpret the world like that, like there wasn't a Fox News angle, there wasn't a CNN angle, there wasn't any military history of battles. It was just how she's observed the world in the 5 years she's been here. And it was an innocence that now allows you also to season it with some deeper perspectives as she grows older, of expanding upon it and helping her understand deeper meaning of it. Those conversations are the ones I love. I routinely, like even this morning, we had a conversation. My son got some military figurines for a present recently. And so he's been setting up a bunch of battles. And the kids were talking about nukes, and they didn't really know what nukes were. So I went on them and talked about them. We've dropped 2 of them. They're all over. I went even into the Cold War. I talked about, and then I told them like the early days in school, they used to like get under the desk to hide. And when you see those fallout shelters signs, like that was from where people were going to hide. And I went on this 10-minute rant on it. And I really enjoyed it. And like, Dad, how do you know all this stuff? I'm like, I'm always learning. And it was a random moment that ties back through this of how you get through it, is really remembering you need to not do it alone. Like the number one thing that the military both taught us, but we don't apply in fatherhood, is that we need to do it together. And I always relate back to the tribal communities where they always have people ahead of them and people behind them. And I always explain it as a barrel of monkeys mindset. Having one hand up, asking for help, realizing I have no idea how I got here and I need help getting out. But then also realizing you've crossed many crucibles that dad's just behind you don't know. And having one hand back. And it's that link that allows you to get through it. And realize it's almost like there's a few pictures that go around the internet of a bunch of Marines kind of being miserable with a bunch of ponchos covered them in the middle of a rainstorm. And as long as it's mutual shared misery, everybody's kind of okay.
Right.
And that's almost kind of like the advice within this, is realizing, and you're connecting with a bunch of dads at the same kids age group, realizing like, wow, that guy's got the same thing as I do. And you're not that unique, and the problems aren't that unique. And you realize like, this is just what life is right now. But you don't get that when you're by yourself, when you're fighting the battle in your war, a war in your head with your words and your stories. And then just seeing and connecting with other dads. To me, that's how I've gotten through every season, is I find more dads. Now that the kids are older, I do adventure play dates with other dads, and we figure out things to do and get excited about whatever random stuff that comes up. And it's those kind of experiences that shares experiences. That's how I get through it. I didn't have that wisdom when my kids were younger, but I can see it now as I see other dads groups out there. There's a group out there called citydadsgroup.com. They are an organization all across the country organizing essentially dad play dates. And so across the country in all the major cities, really, there's a group of dads that organizes play dates for other dads just to connect and hang out. That got dads on their chest and they're either in the stroller or whatever. Like, it's a lot of stay-at-home dads. It's a lot of dads wanting to connect, but it's that feeling of connectedness that will get you through it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this is important for fathers in particular, because there is that that masculine energy that many of us have, that we're like, hey, I've got this figured out. And if I don't have it figured out, I can muscle through this and figure it out on my own. But when we take a look back at life, how many times have we figured out things on our own? Very rarely, right? We've looked at somebody who's gone before us and we've learned from them. We've been educated through the schooling systems to prepare us to go into corporate or industry or the military. And never did we think twice about, hey, somebody's teaching us. But when it comes to being a father, we're like, hey, I've got this. And it's tough for us to set that ego, that masculine energy aside and say, you know what? I don't have this. But it's important to do that. It's important to set that aside and say, you know what? I need help. I mean, many of us who go to the gym, we've gone to personal trainers because personal trainers can help us achieve our physical goals. Well, why would we not go to other fathers and pick their brains so that we can reach our fatherhood goals, so that we can be the best versions of ourselves for our kids, for our brides, as husbands, or as spouses. So talk to those other dads, ask those questions, set that ego aside. I run a podcast called Men Talking Mindfulness, and we have an episode on the beginner's mindset or that growth mindset. And that's one that you're always willing to learn and always willing to ask. You never, in the beginner's mindset, the growth mindset, you never want to be the smartest person in the room. You want to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. So why not surround yourself with fathers who are quote unquote smarter than you, or have at least learned the lessons that you're bound to learn one way or the other. So,
or if you all don't know the answer, at least having 5 guys trying to figure it out together, then you have 5 more people trying to find someone with the answer.
Yeah,
like it just multiplies.
Exactly.
Like herd mentality, the group mentality, everything you're talking about is that ability that life and business were never designed to be done in a vacuum.
Right.
But that's exactly how fatherhood shows up for many men, and it's that
and
lie
so
that we believe too much.
Yep, exactly. So lean on others, right? Lean on others, because that's what's going to get you through this season. All right. Well, so what about becoming that best dad? All right. The next slide that we have up here. What does it require of us? Let's talk about that.
I think in this case, it requires us to know where we're going. Most men that I talk to don't really have a vision of more than a few days in the future. They've been issued this identity of work, paycheck, purpose, and that's about it. Mm-hmm. And now that they have a job, they really don't think about the next job. They don't think about the next learning. And it's that lack of vision that kind of gets us stuck in a rut. And it's that rut that really that prevents us from even growing and becoming a better version of ourselves, let alone just becoming a better dad. Because to me, understanding where you want to go in your life will also allow you to become a better dad, because it's that process of you pursuing more, you learning to lead yourself better, that will allow you to be a better leader as a father to your kids. And it's when we stop bleeding ourselves that I've really seen men get stuck in that rut. And Andy Frisella says this famously, that the only difference between a rut and a grave is the depth. And like being aware that if you're in a rut, realizing it's okay, but you just need to figure out a way out. Then there's been a term that I just recently came up with this, is that we lack gravity in the future. That we often don't have a vision big enough of where our family is going, where we want our family to look like, who we want ourselves to be like, what kind of legacy do we want to leave behind? Because the gravity of that idea, whatever we have in the future, will pull you towards it. And if you create a big enough gravity, everyone in the family will be pulled towards it as well, as like the shared family vision of who we're all becoming as this family. And it's that gravity of that idea that I was missing for so long that prevented me from really breaking free of my own rut. And my pursuit of trying to get through it was just trying to survive today. Right. And while that mindset applies in different moments, it won't survive long term. In that long term, you have to know who you're becoming as a person. You really can't know that unless you have this idea of vision of anything, really. It can be anything. I'm being very abstract here, but you can fill the blank in here with anything that you want to become and head towards. But not having that gets you into this mode of drifting that leads down the trap of you've been a dad for 12 years and it just passed by in a blink of an eye.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the active versus passive, right? Like, it's very easy to fall into a passive fatherhood and just kind of let things happen as they play out. More often than not, that's not going to set you up for success as a father. It's not going to set your children up for success as children and as adults later in their lives. As a father, as a parent, we have to be very active and very, again, intentional about being active, so that we do have a vision. And not only do we have a vision, but we are making steps towards that vision as a father, as a parent, as a family. It's definitely, it takes a mindset shift from shifting from, okay, I'm just going to let things happen, to I'm going to make things happen, and I'm going to take steps to make things happen. So it's another shift there. Becoming the best dad, it requires you to do some work. It's tough, right? We've talked about that already. It is tough, but what comes from putting in the work is a better life for you as a father, for you as a couple, and for you as a family, because you've put in the work. And doggone it, yes, I've got kids, but I've got young kids, but I can see already the benefits that they have, that we have as a family, from my stepping up and doing the work instead of just letting life and letting fatherhood happen. And I can see where that's going to have long-term, lifelong effects on them as children, and affect them as parents. My two daughters as mothers potentially, and my son as a father potentially. They're going to be better for it. And ultimately that's going to, I know you were waxing philosophically earlier. Now I'm probably doing the same, but we can change the world by being a better parent. Start with what's right here with us, and we can change the world.
Correct. Because if we teach, especially as military dads, this is a reason why I love my podcast, Military Veteran Dad, because we've lived rich lives. And if we can pass that richness on to our kids, we give them something that no other kid can have, and that only military dads have the depth to actually gift. And they even have a leg up to understand how they are uniquely designed to fit in the world. And by creating that vision, we also create this idea of, now we know who we need to help us create that vision, which then allows us to go out and look for different people, connect with different people, to enhance our tribe, not just in our dad category, but in every category, to maybe grow a career in something other completely than what you do today, or start a business. Once you have that vision, now you can be like, okay, what problems is that guy going to have, and how can I learn to solve those problems now, early on?
Yeah, for sure. So the next slide that we have up here, I mean, I know you guys are looking at it, but ways to increase your learning. I mean, joining dads groups, which Ben has already mentioned one. What was the website there for
citydadsgroup.com, or it might be org. I'm not 100% sure, but it's City Dads Group. If you Google that, it'll come up.
There you go. And being vulnerable enough to join something like that, right? Again, as the typical masculine energy, a lot of us are like, I've got this, I'm going to man up or muscle through this. Hey, be open, be vulnerable. That is strength. That takes strength, to be vulnerable and to join a group and say, you know what, I don't have this. Let me ask some questions. Let me lean on some who have gone before me and learn from them. Or maybe they haven't gone from before you, but they've learned from others. They know somebody else who's learned that lesson. And definitely, reading books, listen to the podcast, listen to Ben's podcast. Highly recommend. So there you go, John Wayne. He's actually listeting.
We're being stalked by the man that can't talk on the episode today.
There you go, citydadsgroup.com. Listening to podcasts, reading books about it, volunteering in your church, your local community, whatever that looks like, and then joining a mastermind with like-minded folks, like-minded men. I mean, John, and I saw Saul Gomez comment here in the chat. John, Saul, and myself and a few other guys, actually all named John except Saul, are in a mastermind group, and we share open and honestly about what's going on in our lives. And guess what? We're better because of it. We're learning from one another. We're better men. We're better husbands. We're better fathers because we are part of a group that is open, honest, and vulnerable with one another. And that's the only way you're going to really increase your learning, is by being open and honest and vulnerable. So yeah, back over to you, Ben.
There's a front lines of this whole slide, and that is asking another dad for his number. So if you think of how hard it is to ask a girl for a number, think of how hard and awkward it initially seems to be like, hey, what's your number so we can text and maybe coordinate a play date in the future. Those moments don't happen. I consider that like the graduation, when you officially ask another dad for his number so you can text together, or if you connect on like Facebook or something. It's that process that's like where you need to work towards, like being completely open with the idea of like whether he rejects you or not, doesn't matter. You asked, you put the invitation out there to grow, and that allows you to experience more of whatever comes towards you. But all that begins with saying hello. I am here because I had the courage to first say hello to dads at the park here in the subdivision locally. And what I quickly learned is we were both just playing chicken. We both wanted to say hello. It's just neither of us wanted to say it. And so I eventually said, F it, I'm going to say it. And those conversations enriched into who I was. They reflected back a version that I wasn't living. And I began to step into that. And it began with a hello. And no matter where you are at in your season of fatherhood, maybe something we've talked about today resonated, some stuff didn't. What most resonates with most dads is the idea of connecting with other dads. It begins with something as simple as saying hello. And if you want to change your life, repeat saying hello enough times and you will. That on the other side of hello is a conversation and a solution to a problem that you've struggled with for years. And one man can snap his fingers and make it go away. That's the power of hello. And I didn't know that when I got in the military. I didn't know it until almost 10, 12 years later. But having the power of hello taught to me on the way out would have changed everything. And I always say, related to the power of hello, that if you want more opportunity in your life, it's proportional to the amount of people you're talking to daily. If you want more opportunity, you need to talk to more people to understand how big the world really is, and to see other people that have solutions to problems that you suck at.
Yeah, man, that whole reaching out and saying hello, that reminds me. I don't know if you've ever watched the television show, the cartoon. It's an Australian cartoon called Bluey.
Oh, the kids absolutely love it. I thought I was a good dad until I saw Bluey, and I'm like, I can't compete with this guy.
I know. I forget his name, but he's fantastic. But anyhow, there's so many lessons in that show. So if you walk away from this with nothing else besides checking out the show Bluey, check it out, Bluey. But there's
fully endorsed by the Mr. New Dad Project here. It's on Disney Plus and also on Disney Now and also on the Disney Junior channel.
It's fantastic, man. But there's one episode in particular that you just reminded me of, where the kids, it's a dog family, it's a cartoon. The kids are going to this park over and over, and the dads are taking them. So it's two separate families, and the dads eventually get roped into playing some type of role-playing game with the kids on the playground. Like, hey, this is a restaurant, we're going to serve you guys. And the dads are like, okay, yeah, we'll play along. And then after they play, they part ways. The dads part ways. And the kids are like, hey, Dad, are you going to make friends with that other dad? And he's like, nah, most likely not. And then they keep going back day after day, and the fathers keep meeting. And eventually the fathers make friends. And it gets to the point where, like, oh, it's okay to be friends with another man and friends with another father, and ask questions and talk about, and maybe not even asking questions, maybe just venting about fatherhood and how difficult it can be, but also about how wonderful it can be, right? It is difficult and wonderful. So check out that episode of Bluey, and you will feel better about yourself. So that's another way to increase your learning. Check out Bluey.
Have you seen the SNL skit Man Park?
Oh, yes. I would just watch that like 3 weeks ago.
That's maybe. Like the opposite, more of adult humor, but speaking to the same thing, that there's this place that dads need to go where it's safe, where we can play, and we're licensed people that can talk to each other in this safe zone where our wives bring us to have conversations with other dads.
Yes. And talk about what was it? Marvel versus DC Comics or whatever the case may be, and that's what knuckle draggers we all are when it really comes down to it, but also how much we all care. So yeah, I think that's all I've got. That's all the wisdom I've got.
That is all we've got to share
man.
today. What we've got on the screen is that QR code. If you scan that with your phone, that'll take you to a Telegram chat where John and I will be continuing to share value in the future in between these sessions that we keep doing. And we're getting excited about a new program that John's working on for new dads in particular, where what most dads in the business world don't really have is this program to help them learn these skills that we're talking about today. So we're excited about that coming. Stay tuned for that in 2022. To stay up to date on that, make sure you subscribe to our Telegram channel there.
That's awesome. I'm going to have to learn more about that, how to do that Telegram channel and the QR code. You guys are well ahead of me in marketing yourself that way. But and I look forward to hearing more about this new dad group coaching program and maybe being a part of it. So
I appreciate you, John, for filling in. This conversation was just as rich as I expected. And I am positive there were many dads that got a piece of takeaway on this episode of Mr. New Dad.
Right on, brother. Well, until next time, take care.